Imagine finding a ring that makes you invisible whenever you wear it. You could do anything without anyone knowing. No one could punish you or stop you. You could take what you want, lie, or hurt others, and no one would ever find out. This is the idea behind the Ring of Gyges, a story from ancient philosophy. It asks a question we still face today. If you could act without consequences, would you still do what is right? Or would you give in to temptation? The paradox is simple but deep. People often follow rules because they fear punishment or want reward. But if those external pressures disappear, will morality still guide our actions? The story of Gyges comes from around 360 BC in ancient Greece. The philosopher Plato tells it in his book, The Republic. Gyges was a shepherd who worked for the king of Lydia, a region in what is now western Turkey. One day, Gyges discovered a ring that could make him invisible. Using this power, he eventually took the throne by killing the king. This story is not just about magic. It explores human nature and ethics. Plato uses Gyges as an example to ask whether people are good by choice or only because of consequences. The ring symbolizes temptation and the chance to act without punishment. Understanding this background helps us think about why rules, fairness, and morality exist in society. At the core, the Ring of Gyges raises questions about human behavior. One principle is that people may act selfishly if they know no one can see them. Another is that morality is often tied to social pressure. Plato suggests that justice is valuable, but we might only follow it when there are risks for breaking it. We can think of morality as a contract between people. Even if no one is watching, the contract exists to maintain trust and order. Without it, society can fall apart. This principle is supported by the idea of accountability. Even if there is no punishment, being fair and kind often brings long-term benefits like friendships, respect, and self-respect. An analogy can make this clearer. Imagine a classroom where the teacher leaves the room. Some students might cheat because no one is watching, but others follow the rules because they believe it is right. The invisible ring tests whether morality is inside us or only a reaction to rules. Scenario 1 is a modern example. Suppose a student finds an answer key to an important exam. No teacher will ever know. Some might use it to get a higher score. Others might resist, thinking that true learning matters more than the grade. This shows how temptation challenges personal ethics. Scenario 2 shows an alternative view. Consider a company with access to a secret formula that can make huge profits by harming the environment. If the company could do it secretly, would the leaders still protect people and nature, or give in to greed? This highlights that even adults face similar moral dilemmas as Gyges. The two scenarios reveal differences in choices under temptation. One choice might bring immediate reward but long-term regret. Another might seem harder at first but builds trust and integrity. The invisible ring is like a thought experiment that measures what matters more, instant gain or lasting principles. We can simplify this with a balanced scale. On one side is temptation and personal gain. On the other side is morality and reputation. The story of Gyges helps us see how easily the scale can tip towards selfishness when consequences disappear. Philosophically, the story asks us to reflect on our inner values. It shows that morality is more than following rules. True ethics might require resisting desires even when no one is watching. This applies to daily life, like honesty, kindness, and fairness. The challenge is that temptation is natural. No one is perfectly immune. The lesson is not to expect perfection, but to understand the power of choice. Practicing small acts of integrity strengthens our character and prepares us to face bigger challenges. We also learn that consequences alone do not create good people. Awareness of right and wrong, empathy for others, and self-respect are vital. By considering Gyges, we understand that ethics is an inner compass, not just a rulebook. The Ring of Gyges reminds us that power and invisibility test human nature. It asks whether we act rightly because it is right or only because we fear being caught. The story leaves us with a clear insight. True morality comes from within, not from punishment or reward. In everyday life, we face our own invisible rings, from small temptations to major choices. Reflecting on these moments can guide us toward honesty, courage, and fairness. Choosing the right path even when no one is watching shapes who we truly are. Imagine being stranded on a tiny lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. The sun is scorching, food is gone, and water is almost finished. You are not alone. Around you are other survivors, people you know and strangers alike. You must make choices that could decide who lives and who dies. Survival seems simple at first. Find food, find water, stay alive. But it is not just about survival of the body. It is also about survival of conscience. How far would you go to stay alive? What actions are acceptable when life is at stake? This brings us to a central question. In extreme situations, is it ethical to do things that would normally be considered wrong if it means saving your life? Could survival justify acts that society would never allow under normal conditions? One of the most famous cases of survival in extreme conditions happened in 1884 with the shipwreck of the Scottish whaling ship Mignonette. The ship sank in the South Atlantic, and 4 men survived in a small lifeboat. They had very little food and water, and after days of drifting, they faced starvation. The men eventually made a tragic decision. One of them, the youngest crew member, was killed so the others could survive. When rescued, the surviving men were put on trial in England. The case, known as R.V. Dudley and Stevens, became famous because it questioned whether extreme hunger could justify taking another human life. This story shows that survival ethics are not just theoretical. They have real consequences. It also shows that humans face moral dilemmas that have no easy answers when life is threatened. Understanding this case helps us see why people debate survival ethics even today. At the heart of survival ethics is a conflict between two ideas: self-preservation and moral responsibility. Self-preservation is the natural instinct to stay alive. Moral responsibility is the understanding that certain actions are right or wrong, regardless of circumstances. Ethics asks whether rules that guide normal life still apply when survival is at stake. One principle is that life is precious, but so is fairness and justice. Another is that desperation can cloud judgment, making choices more about instinct than reason. Philosophers use frameworks like utilitarianism to explore survival ethics. This framework asks what action will result in the greatest good or the least harm. In a lifeboat, utilitarian thinking might lead someone to make hard choices about resources or sacrifices. Another framework is deontology, which focuses on duty and rules. From this view, killing someone, even to survive, is always wrong. Analogies can make these ideas easier to understand. Imagine a small fire in a house with limited exits. You can save yourself, but someone else is trapped. Do you take the safest path for yourself or risk yourself to help them? Survival ethics is like this. It forces us to choose between instinct and principle under pressure. Scenario 1 is the lifeboat situation. You are drifting at sea. Food and water are almost gone. Some suggest harming another to stay alive. Some refuse. The survivors must decide together. Each choice carries consequences for life, conscience, and the law. Scenario 2 shows a different perspective. Imagine a mountain climber trapped in a blizzard. There is a single rope, and only one can climb to safety at a time. The climber must decide who goes first. Here, the decision is not about breaking laws, but about choosing who survives. Ethics in survival can be about fairness and human compassion as much as rules and instincts. In the lifeboat case, the probability of survival was low. Any choice could mean death for someone. In the mountain scenario, survival chances could be increased with careful planning. Comparing them shows that survival decisions are often shaped by circumstances, not just morality. Analogies help clarify this. Think of survival as a game of chess against nature. Each move matters, but the rules of the game are not always fair. Sometimes, making the move that saves your piece may hurt another. Ethics asks us to consider not just winning, but how we play the game. Survival ethics teaches that extreme situations reveal the tension between instinct and morality. People may act against their values when pushed to the limit. History shows that society judges these actions differently depending on context. One challenge is that no one can fully predict behavior under life-threatening conditions. Fear, hunger, and exhaustion can distort thinking. Laws and moral codes try to create clear boundaries, but real-life situations are messy and complicated. The deeper lesson is about human responsibility. Survival does not mean abandoning ethics entirely. It asks us to balance self-preservation with respect for others. Compassion, honesty, and fairness remain important even when life is at stake. Thinking through extreme scenarios can make us more aware of our values and how we might act under pressure. Shipwreck and survival ethics challenge us to think deeply about right and wrong. They show that humans face hard choices when nature tests limits. Even when survival is uncertain, ethics still matter. Our decisions define not just life, but character. Perhaps the takeaway is this. Consider what you would do if rules were suspended, but your conscience still existed. Survival is not only about staying alive. It is about staying human while facing the hardest choices life can offer. Imagine being in a dark cave, chained so that you can only face the wall in front of you. Behind you, a fire burns, and between the fire and you, people walk, holding objects. You see only the shadows of these objects dancing on the wall. These shadows are all you know as reality. Now imagine being freed and stepping outside into sunlight, seeing the real world for the first time. How would you feel if everything you believed was true turned out to be only shadows? This idea comes from a story called The Allegory of the Cave, which shows how what we see and believe may not always be the full truth. It asks a deep question: how do we know what is real, and how do our perceptions shape our understanding of the world? The allegory of the cave comes from ancient Greece, around 380 BCE. The story was told by the philosopher Plato in his work called The Republic. Plato lived in Athens, a city known for learning and debate. He was a student of Socrates, another great thinker, and used this story to explain his ideas about knowledge and reality. Plato wanted people to think about the difference between what they see with their eyes and what they understand with their minds. He believed that most people live like prisoners in a cave, only seeing shadows of the truth. The allegory of the cave is still remembered because it helps us think about learning, wisdom, and seeing beyond what is obvious. At the heart of the allegory of the cave is the idea that reality and perception can be very different. People often mistake what they see for the truth. In the cave, prisoners see shadows on the wall and think they are real. These shadows are like opinions or illusions in everyday life. Plato also explains that knowledge is a journey. The prisoner who is freed experiences pain and confusion at first because the sunlight is bright and the world is different from the cave. But gradually, they begin to understand what is real. This shows that learning is not always easy. True knowledge requires effort, patience, and sometimes leaving comfort behind. The story also teaches about enlightenment. Just as the freed prisoner sees real objects and the sun, humans can understand truth and ideas beyond appearances. We can compare shadows to rumors, assumptions, or first impressions. The sunlight represents understanding, wisdom, and deeper insight. This analogy helps explain why some people may resist change or new ideas. They are comfortable with what they already see. Imagine a student who believes that one subject is impossible to understand. They only see their poor test scores and think that they are not smart enough. This is like living in the cave. With guidance, practice, and new methods, the student slowly begins to understand the subject. They start seeing knowledge in a new light, realizing that their earlier beliefs were only shadows of what they could achieve. Now imagine a society where people believe only what they see on social media. They trust images and headlines without checking facts. This is another kind of cave. Some individuals may research, ask questions, and look for deeper truths. When they find more accurate information, it changes how they see the world, often causing others to doubt or resist the new ideas. This shows how perception shapes our understanding and how difficult it can be to share true knowledge. The difference between shadows and reality is like comparing a drawing to a real object. A drawing shows the shape but not the texture, color, or depth. Similarly, shadows in the cave give prisoners some idea of objects, but not the full reality. Understanding reality requires more than observation. It requires thought, reflection, and questioning assumptions. In daily life, people often confuse appearances with truth. Comparing the cave to everyday situations helps clarify this. Just as the prisoner must leave the cave to see the sun, we must question and explore beyond what is easy to believe to truly understand our world. The allegory of the cave has many lessons for life. It reminds us that learning is a process, not an instant result. Seeing beyond first impressions allows us to grow as individuals and understand others better. Knowledge gives freedom, but it also brings responsibility. The freed prisoner might want to return to the cave to help others, even if they are not ready to accept the truth. However, there are challenges. Many people resist new ideas because they are comfortable with the familiar. Seeking knowledge can be uncomfortable or even lonely at times. Yet, the pursuit of truth is important because it shapes our decisions, actions, and values. The deeper lesson is that reality is often hidden, and our minds play a role in uncovering it. We must be willing to question what we see, learn from different perspectives, and accept that understanding is a journey, not a destination. The allegory of the cave shows that reality is more than what meets the eye. It teaches that knowledge changes perception, and that seeking truth requires courage and patience. It reminds us that what we believe may not always be the whole truth. True understanding comes from stepping out of the shadows, asking questions, and exploring beyond our comfort zone. We can think of life as a cave where shadows and appearances surround us. How far are we willing to step into the light to see reality clearly? And how will this change the way we live and think? Imagine you have a favorite bicycle. Over time, its tires, seat, and handlebars wear out. One by one, you replace each part. After a while, none of the original parts remain. Is it still the same bicycle? This question is similar to an ancient idea called the ship of Theseus. The main concept asks whether something remains the same if all its parts are replaced over time. The central paradox is simple yet puzzling. If every part of a ship is replaced, is it still the original ship? Or does it become something new? This question makes us think deeply about identity and change. The story of the ship of Theseus comes from ancient Greece, around 500 BCE, in the city of Athens. The ship belonged to the hero Theseus, who, according to legend, defeated the Minotaur and became king of Athens. Over the years, the Athenians preserved his ship as a sacred relic. When wooden planks or parts began to rot, they replaced them with new wood. Eventually, every single part of the ship had been changed. Philosophers began asking whether it was still the same ship Theseus had sailed or a completely new one. This story has survived for thousands of years because it raises questions about identity, memory, and what it means to remain oneself. To understand this idea, it helps to remember that identity is often linked to continuity. We think of objects, people, and even memories as having a core that defines them. The ship of Theseus challenges that idea by showing how change can be total, yet we still perceive continuity. At the heart of the ship of Theseus are two key principles. The first is continuity. Continuity means something keeps its identity over time despite changes. For example, you might grow taller, learn new things, and change physically, but you are still you. The second principle is composition. Composition focuses on the parts that make up a whole. If you replace enough parts, does the whole remain the same? This principle asks us to consider whether an object is defined by its parts, its function, or its history. To clarify, imagine a puzzle. If you replace one puzzle piece, the image is mostly the same. If you replace all pieces, the picture might look identical, but it is not made of the original pieces. Which is the true puzzle, the original or the replaced one? Another helpful analogy is a tree. A tree sheds leaves and grows new ones each season. Its cells change constantly, yet we call it the same tree. The ship of Theseus questions whether objects, like trees or ships, retain their identity in a similar way. Scenario 1 is a personal object, like a bicycle. Over time, the tires, chain, seat, and frame are replaced. After all the changes, some may argue it is still your bicycle because of your memories and attachment. Others may say it is a new bicycle because none of the original parts remain. Scenario 2 is about a human body. Every few years, most of our cells are replaced. Does that mean we are not the same person we were as a child? This example shows that the paradox applies not only to objects, but also to living beings. We carry identity through continuity, memory, and experience, not just physical parts. If we compare objects and living beings, we notice similarities and differences. Objects may rely more on their parts for identity, while living beings rely more on memory, consciousness, and continuity of experience. One way to simplify this is to imagine a computer. You can replace the hard drive, keyboard, and screen, but it might still function as the same computer. Yet, if you copy everything to a new machine, which one is truly the original? This shows that identity can be seen in different ways, by parts, function, or history. The ship of Theseus has broad philosophical meaning. It challenges how we think about ourselves, our possessions, and even society. It suggests that change is natural and does not necessarily destroy identity. However, there are challenges. Some may feel that identity must remain tied to original parts or origins. Others believe identity is flexible, shaped by use, memory, and recognition. This debate shows that identity is both simple and complex, depending on perspective. A deeper lesson is that change and continuity often exist together. Just as the ship is still remembered as Theseus's ship, we continue to be ourselves even as we change. Identity may not be fixed, but is instead a story we carry over time. The ship of Theseus teaches us that identity is a delicate balance between change and continuity. It is not only about what something is made of, but also about how it is remembered and experienced. In the end, the paradox does not have a single answer. Instead, it invites reflection on what it means to remain oneself. Perhaps the takeaway is that identity is both constant and evolving. Whether it is a ship, a bicycle, or a person, we are defined by our history, our parts, and the continuity of our existence. Change does not erase identity, it shapes it in new ways. Imagine two people caught doing something wrong. They are put in separate rooms. Each one has a choice: stay silent or blame the other. What would you do if you were in their place? This is the central idea of the prisoner's dilemma, a problem that shows how people make decisions when their choices affect each other. It asks a tricky question. Is it better to trust someone else or protect yourself first? The idea of the prisoner's dilemma started in the 1950s. A mathematician named Albert W. Tucker in the United States gave it a clear form. He wanted to explain a problem that comes up in real life when two people must decide without knowing what the other will do. Tucker did not create the story about prisoners actually in jail. He used it as an example to show how cooperation and self-interest can conflict. This story helps us understand why people sometimes make choices that are not best for everyone, even when they know working together would be better. At its core, the prisoner's dilemma is about choices and consequences. The main rule is simple. If both people stay silent, they get a small punishment. If one blames the other while the other stays silent, the one who blames goes free, and the other gets a heavy punishment. If both blame each other, both get a medium punishment. The puzzle is that each person wants the best outcome for themselves, but acting selfishly can lead to a worse result than if they had cooperated. One way to understand it is to imagine two kids sharing a toy. If both share, both are happy. If one takes it while the other shares, the taker gets more, and the other is sad. If both take it at the same time, they both end up unhappy. Think about some situations where this happens in real life. For example, two students caught cheating on a test might be asked to confess. If both confess, they both get a smaller punishment. If one confesses and the other stays quiet, the confessor gets nothing, and the other gets in trouble. If both stay quiet, they both risk a bigger punishment if the teacher finds out later. Another example is countries deciding whether to reduce pollution. If both reduce, the world is better off. If one reduces while the other does not, the first bears the cost, and the second benefits. If neither reduces, everyone suffers. When we compare these outcomes, it is clear that thinking only about ourselves can make everyone worse off. The prisoner's dilemma shows that sometimes the smartest choice for the group is not the one that feels safest for the individual. Using simple ideas like sharing or helping can make it easier to see what is happening. This problem teaches a larger lesson about trust, cooperation, and human behavior. It shows that short-term gain can lead to long-term loss. It also reminds us that our decisions are connected to others. The challenge is that people do not always act as we hope, and this makes outcomes uncertain. Yet, the deeper insight is that building trust and thinking beyond ourselves often brings better results. In the end, the prisoner's dilemma is not just a puzzle. It is a way to think about life and choices. We learn that sometimes working together is hard, but it is also rewarding. We can ask ourselves, how do we act when what we do affects someone else? Every choice we make is part of a larger story of trust and responsibility. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you see, hear, and feel might not be real. You think you are sitting in your room, talking to your friends, or walking in the park. But what if all of it is just happening inside a machine? This is the idea behind the brain in a vat. It asks a simple but strange question. How do we know that what we experience is real? Could it be possible that our brain is floating in a tank, connected to wires and screens, while we believe we are living a normal life? This thought is puzzling because it challenges the way we trust our senses. If our senses can be tricked, then what can we really know about the world? It is both exciting and worrying to think about this possibility. The idea of a brain in a vat is inspired by earlier philosophical thinking about reality. One famous example comes from 17th century France. In 1690, René Descartes, a French philosopher, wrote about the possibility that our senses could deceive us. He imagined a world where a powerful being could trick us into believing in something that was not real. Descartes asked how we could ever be sure that our thoughts matched the true world outside our minds. Descartes did not talk about a literal brain in a tank, but his questions about doubt and reality inspired later thinkers. Philosophers used his ideas to explore whether our senses could be completely unreliable. Understanding this helps us see why the brain in a vat idea exists. It is not just science fiction. It is a serious question about how we know anything at all. The brain in a vat idea is based on a few core principles. First, it assumes that our experiences come from signals to the brain. When we see a tree, hear a song, or taste chocolate, it is actually our brain interpreting electrical signals. Second, it shows that if those signals were controlled by something else, like a computer or a machine, our perception of reality could be completely fake. To understand this better, imagine watching a very realistic video game. The images look real, the sounds feel real, and you might even react as if it is real. Now, imagine that your whole life was like that video game. Every sight, sound, and feeling would be part of a program, but you would have no idea. Philosophers call this a thought experiment because it helps us think deeply about difficult questions. Another important idea is skepticism. It is the principle that we should question what we believe. Just because something seems true does not mean it is true. This principle is central to understanding the brain in a vat. It asks us to question reality itself. One scenario is imagining a future where science can fully simulate human experience. A scientist could keep your brain alive in a special vat and connect it to a computer that sends perfect signals. You would see, hear, and feel everything just as if you were alive in the world. You would not know your body is gone, and every experience would seem normal. Another perspective is thinking about dreams. When you dream, you experience events that feel real while you are asleep. You might talk, laugh, or even get scared, but it is not happening in the real world. The brain in a vat scenario is similar, except it lasts your whole life and is created by technology instead of your mind alone. We can compare being a brain in a vat to watching a movie. In a movie, you see actors and events that seem real, but you know they are not. In the brain in a vat, the difference is you do not know it is fake. It feels completely real, which makes it much harder to detect. Thinking about probabilities, it seems unlikely that everyone is a brain in a vat. But the point is not to prove it is happening. The point is to understand that our senses alone cannot guarantee reality. Just like a movie can trick our emotions, controlled signals could trick our entire mind. The brain in a vat idea has deep meaning. It teaches us that what we see and feel might not always be the truth. It reminds us to be careful about assumptions and to seek evidence. This idea also connects to science and technology. As virtual reality and artificial intelligence improve, it becomes more realistic that experiences could be simulated. There are challenges too. If we cannot trust our senses, how can we act in the world? How do we make decisions if everything could be fake? These questions show the limits of knowledge. The deeper lesson is about thinking critically and being aware of uncertainty. It encourages curiosity. It asks us to consider not just what we know, but how we know it. It also invites imagination, helping us explore possibilities beyond ordinary life. The brain in a vat is more than a strange idea. It is a way to explore reality and question our beliefs. It shows that our world might be more fragile and mysterious than we think. By thinking about it, we learn to be careful, curious, and thoughtful. Reality may feel solid, but our understanding of it can always grow. The final thought is simple. Even if we are not brains in vats, imagining the possibility reminds us to reflect on what is real, what is imagined, and how much power our mind has to shape experience. It challenges us to live thoughtfully and question wisely. Imagine you wake up one morning and see the sun rising in the east. You think it will rise in the east tomorrow as well. Every day of your life, the sun has done the same. You might feel very sure it will rise tomorrow too. But how do you really know it will? This simple thought introduces a big question in philosophy called the problem of induction. Induction is a way of thinking where we predict the future based on past experiences. The problem is that even if something has always happened, there is no guarantee it will happen again. So the central question is, can we truly rely on what has happened before to tell us what will happen in the future, or is that just an assumption we take for granted? The problem of induction was first clearly explained by the Scottish philosopher David Hume in 1748. Hume lived in Edinburgh, Scotland, during a time when science and reason were becoming very important. People were excited about discovering laws of nature and predicting how the world works. Hume used a simple example to explain his idea. He asked people to think about watching a billiard ball hit another. You might see that every time one ball strikes another, the second ball moves. You might then assume that the same will happen every time. But Hume asked, how do you know it will always happen? Just because it happened in the past does not prove it must happen in the future. Understanding this background is important because before Hume, most people thought that if something happened many times, it was naturally certain to happen again. Hume showed that this belief is not guaranteed, but is a habit of thinking. The core principle behind the problem of induction is that experience alone cannot guarantee future outcomes. Just because the sun has risen every day does not logically prove it will rise tomorrow. Hume explained that we assume patterns will continue, but this is a psychological habit, not a logical certainty. One supporting idea is that we often confuse correlation with causation. Seeing one event follow another does not mean the first event caused the second, or that it will always follow in the same way. Another principle is skepticism, the idea of questioning what we think we know. Hume encouraged careful thinking about why we believe things based on experience. An analogy can make this easier to understand. Imagine you have a basket of red apples. Every time you pick an apple, it is red. You might start believing that all apples are red. But if you pick one from a new basket, it could be green. Just because something is true many times does not make it universally true. Scenario 1 is simple. A farmer notices that every spring, the river near his field floods. He assumes it will flood next spring too. But one year, the river does not flood. The farmer's assumption based on past experience was not guaranteed. Scenario 2 is about technology. You have a phone that works perfectly every day. You might think it will never stop working. But eventually, it might break or run out of battery. The phone's past performance cannot completely predict its future. This shows how even strong patterns can fail. When we compare these situations, we see that past experience is useful, but it is not certain. It can guide our decisions, but we cannot treat it as proof. Using analogies like the apples or the river helps simplify this. They show that assuming the future is exactly like the past can lead to mistakes. Probability and uncertainty are always present. The problem of induction has broad implications. In science, it reminds us that theories are based on evidence, but they are never 100% certain. A scientist can predict that a chemical will react in a certain way based on experiments, but there is always a small chance it could behave differently. In daily life, it teaches caution. We often trust habits or patterns, but they can change. This does not mean we cannot rely on experience at all, but we should recognize its limits. Another insight is that our minds are designed to expect patterns. Hume's idea shows that this expectation is natural, yet not foolproof. A challenge of induction is that it can make us overconfident. We may assume things are safe or reliable when they are not. But the deeper lesson is about humility in thinking. Knowing that the future may surprise us encourages careful observation, questioning, and openness to change. In summary, the problem of induction asks us to think about how we make predictions based on past experiences. It shows that no matter how often something happens, we cannot be absolutely sure it will happen again. This idea is both simple and profound. It teaches that certainty is rare and that questioning assumptions is valuable. An open-ended takeaway is to be thoughtful about what we assume. Next time you trust a habit or pattern, Pause and ask whether it is truly certain or just what seems likely. In doing so, we become more careful thinkers and more aware of the surprises the world can bring. Imagine a room with a strange machine. Every time you pull a lever, the machine flips a coin that you cannot see. If it lands heads, nothing happens. If it lands tails, something terrifying occurs. You cannot predict the outcome, yet you are certain that from your own view, you will always survive. This strange idea comes from a thought experiment called quantum suicide. It is tied to another concept called quantum immortality, which asks what would happen if a person could never truly experience their own death. The central question is unsettling. If quantum mechanics allows multiple realities to exist at the same time, could there be a version of you that always survives, no matter what dangers you face? Could you, in a sense, live forever, while others like you cease to exist in some worlds? To understand this, we need to go back to 1957 in Princeton, New Jersey, where a physicist named Hugh Everett introduced an idea that would puzzle the world. Everett suggested that every time a quantum event happens, the universe splits into different versions, each following one possible outcome. Everett was trying to make sense of strange behaviors in quantum particles. Experiments showed particles could act in ways that seemed random, but he proposed a bold view. Instead of randomness, every possible outcome happens, but in separate, branching realities. This became known as the many-worlds interpretation. Everett's theory was not widely accepted at first. Many scientists preferred simpler explanations, but over time, it became a foundation for imagining what might happen if consciousness could follow only the paths where survival occurs. The idea of quantum suicide grew directly from his work. At the core of quantum suicide is the many-worlds idea. Every time a quantum event with more than one possible outcome happens, the universe splits. In one universe, the coin lands heads. In another, it lands tails. Both outcomes exist simultaneously, but each in a separate reality. Quantum immortality builds on this. Suppose a person is in a life-threatening situation controlled by a quantum event. In worlds where they die, they cannot experience that death. In worlds where they survive, they continue living. From their own perspective, they always find themselves in a universe where they survive. Think of it like a tree. Every decision, every random event is a branch. You walk along one branch, but in other branches, other versions of you walk different paths. You only notice the branch where you are still alive. Another analogy is a video game with multiple save points. You make a choice, and if it leads to game over, that version stops. But in the version you experience, you continue playing. In a sense, your consciousness always follows the version that survives. Consider a scientist named Alice performing an experiment with a gun rigged to a quantum device. Each time she pulls the trigger, the device either clicks safely or fires. In most universes, the worst happens, but from her own perspective, she only experiences the universes where the gun clicks safely. To her, it seems like she is impossible to kill. Now imagine an alternative perspective. Suppose Alice is observing another person doing the same experiment. From her view, that person dies in some branches. This highlights that quantum immortality only applies to the observer's own consciousness. Others are not guaranteed to survive. This thought experiment raises interesting questions about probability. Objectively, the chance of dying is real in many worlds. Subjectively, survival feels certain. It is like rolling a die with many faces, where each roll creates a new universe. You only notice the rolls where you do not lose. Using another analogy, imagine watching a movie with multiple endings. You only ever remember the ending where the main character survives. To you, it feels like they cannot die, even though other endings exist for other viewers. Quantum suicide works in a similar way. Philosophically, Quantum suicide challenges our understanding of life and death. If some version of you always survives, what does it mean to take risks or to value life? Could living in endless survival change the way you feel about danger or happiness? There are limits. Quantum immortality does not make a person invincible. Pain, injury, and suffering still exist. It also does not help loved ones, because they continue to experience death in some realities. The thought experiment is more about consciousness than physical reality. One lesson is humility. Even if science hints at infinite possibilities, we cannot escape consequences for others. Another lesson is curiosity. Imagining alternate realities stretches our mind and invites us to question the meaning of survival and identity. Quantum suicide is a strange mirror reflecting life, death, and the choices we face. It reminds us that our reality is only one of many possibilities. Thinking about it carefully, it makes survival feel both miraculous and fragile. Even if one version of you continues, many versions do not. Perhaps the most important takeaway is to live fully in the reality you experience. Each decision, each moment, matters in this branch of the universe you call your life. What you do today cannot be undone, and that may be the most real form of immortality we have. Imagine a machine that could give you any experience you wanted. You could feel happiness, success, or adventure exactly as if it were real, even if it never actually happened. This is the idea behind the experience machine, created by the philosopher Robert Nozick in 1974. He asked us to think about whether we would choose a life of perfect pleasure inside this machine or live in the real world with all its ups and downs. The central question is whether happiness alone is enough for a good life, or if reality itself matters. The experience machine asks you to imagine being connected to a device that could simulate your perfect life. While inside, you would feel loved, achieve your goals, and experience amazing adventures. The challenge is that none of it would be real. You would not truly accomplish anything, and no one outside the machine would know your achievements. People often think we would want to live inside the machine because it promises total pleasure. But Nozick argues there is a problem. Even if we love pleasure, many of us hesitate to give up reality. The dilemma is whether we value happiness more than truth and genuine experiences. Some initial solutions suggest we could accept the machine for the sake of perfect joy or reject it to stay connected to reality. We can imagine variations of the experience machine. What if you could leave the machine anytime? Would you go back to reality or stay in a world of perfect pleasure? Another possibility is choosing partial experiences, where some achievements are real and some are simulated. These variations show that people do care about more than just pleasure. They want their actions to matter and their experiences to be real. The implication is that humans are not satisfied by feelings alone. Reality and authenticity play an essential role in our lives. The experience machine explores ideas about pleasure, reality, and values. One key principle is hedonism, which says that happiness is the highest good. Nozick challenges this by suggesting that people care about things beyond pleasure, like truth, freedom, and personal growth. Philosophers have long debated whether the goal of life is to feel good or to live meaningfully. This thought experiment helps clarify what really matters to us by separating pleasure from reality. The machine shows us that life is not only about feeling happy. People want real connections, accomplishments, and experiences they can genuinely call their own. This idea can seem surprising because we often think happiness is all that matters. The experiment invites us to reflect on why we value reality and authenticity, even when illusions could make us feel perfect. The experience machine can help us understand modern technology, like virtual reality or social media. It raises questions about living online or in simulated worlds. We must consider what we lose when experiences are only virtual. The experiment also informs psychology and ethics, asking how people should balance pleasure with real-world responsibilities. It reminds us to think carefully about what truly matters in our lives. The experience machine shows that happiness alone may not make life meaningful. We value real experiences, truth, and personal growth. It challenges us to reflect on the choices we make and the lives we want to lead. In the end, the question remains whether we would choose a perfect illusion or a real life full of both joy and struggle. Imagine a cat that is both alive and dead at the same time. It sounds strange, almost like a magic trick, but it is actually a famous idea in science. This thought experiment is called Schrödinger's cat. It was first introduced in 1935 by Erwin Schrödinger, an Austrian physicist, while he was working in Vienna, Austria. Schrödinger created this imaginary story to explain a strange idea in quantum mechanics, the science of very tiny particles. He wanted to show how the rules of the quantum world do not easily fit with the world we see every day. The main question he asked was simple yet puzzling. Can something be in two opposite states at once? In the thought experiment, Schrödinger imagined a closed box. Inside the box there is a cat, a small amount of radioactive material, a Geiger counter to detect radiation, a hammer, and a vial of poison. If the radioactive atom decays, the Geiger counter will trigger the hammer to break the vial, releasing the poison and killing the cat. But if the atom does not decay, the cat stays alive. The strange part is that, according to quantum theory, the atom can be both decayed and not decayed until someone opens the box and observes it. So before the box is opened, the cat is considered both alive and dead at the same time. This is the paradox. The challenge is understanding how two opposite realities can exist together until we look inside. Some early scientists thought observation itself decides reality. Others believe the cat must already be one way or the other. Later thinkers extended Schrödinger's idea. Some said maybe each outcome exists in its own universe. In one universe, the cat is alive. In another, it is dead. This is called the many-worlds idea. Others said that the cat becomes one way when it interacts with the environment, long before the box is opened. This view uses the idea of decoherence, where contact with the outside world causes one clear result. Each version tries to explain how quantum possibilities become single outcomes. These solutions help scientists think more deeply about what it means to observe or measure something. The main principle behind this story is quantum superposition. It means that a particle can exist in more than one state until it is measured. This idea is very different from how big objects, like cats, behave. Schrödinger used his cat example to show the difference between the quantum world and the classical world we live in. It was not meant to describe a real experiment, but to make people question how we understand reality. This thought experiment also shows the role of the observer. Does looking at something change what it is? The Schrödinger's cat story teaches us that reality might be more mysterious than it seems. It reminds us that what we see depends on how we look. It also shows that science is not only about facts, but also about questions that challenge our thinking. The idea that something can be both true and false at once goes against common sense. Yet it helps us see that the universe may not follow our everyday logic. The ideas behind Schrödinger's cat are important in modern science. Quantum computers, for example, use superposition to perform many calculations at once. In philosophy, this thought experiment is used to discuss truth, knowledge, and perception. It also helps people think about uncertainty and the limits of human observation. The cat story is not just about physics. It is about how we understand existence itself. Schrödinger's cat remains one of the most famous and puzzling ideas in science. It teaches us to question what we mean by reality. It reminds us that even simple stories can hold deep truths. Perhaps the lesson is that every mystery begins when we dare to look inside the box. Imagine a child choosing between one candy now or two candies tomorrow. Many people grab the candy right away, even though waiting gives more. This small choice shows a big pattern in human thinking. Hyperbolic discounting is about how we value time. We often care much more about the present than the future. A reward today feels stronger than a bigger reward later. This happens to adults and children, in small choices and life-changing ones. Hyperbolic discounting means people prefer smaller rewards now over larger rewards later. The value of future rewards drops quickly as time increases. This idea comes from psychology and behavioral economics, which study how real people make choices, not perfect ones. Researchers noticed that people do not think in straight lines about time. A delay of one day feels very important when the reward is close, but less important when the reward is far away. Our brains are built to care about the present. Immediate rewards feel real and exciting. Future rewards feel distant and uncertain. Emotions, habits, and self-control all play a role. The brain areas linked to pleasure often speak louder than the parts linked to planning. This is why people make plans for the future but change their minds when the moment arrives. The pull of now becomes stronger than the promise of later. In the late 1960s, psychologist Walter Mischel ran a famous experiment at Stanford University in California. Children were given a choice. They could eat one marshmallow right away or wait and get two later. Some waited, some did not. Mischel found that waiting was very hard. The children who distracted themselves waited longer. This experiment showed how strongly the present pulls on us. It also showed that self-control can be learned. This pattern appears everywhere. People choose junk food over healthy meals. They spend money instead of saving it. They delay homework and chores. They stay up late even when they know they will feel tired tomorrow. Today, apps, games, and social media use instant rewards to keep attention. Buy now buttons make spending easy. Fast delivery makes waiting feel pointless. Hyperbolic discounting still shapes choices in a faster world. Understanding this idea helps people make better choices. It explains why good intentions fail. It helps design tools like reminders, savings plans, and healthy habits. Everyone feels this pull, but not in the same way. Knowing it exists builds self-awareness. It reminds us to pause and think. The key lesson is simple. The present is powerful, but the future matters too. When we notice the pull of now, we gain the chance to choose more wisely. Imagine a child who loves drawing after school. One day, an adult starts paying the child for every picture. Soon, the drawings slow down. Why did joy fade? Have you ever noticed that rewards sometimes reduce interest instead of raising it? This strange change invites us to think deeper. This idea is called the overjustification effect. It explains how giving rewards for something we already enjoy can weaken our inner drive. The overjustification effect means that external rewards can replace internal motivation. When praise, money, or prizes take over, the original joy may shrink. The idea grew from motivation research in psychology. In the late 20th century, scientists studied why people choose to act. They noticed that too many rewards can shift focus from enjoyment to payoff. Key features stand out. Intrinsic motivation comes from interest and meaning. Extrinsic motivation comes from rewards and pressure. When extrinsic rewards dominate, intrinsic motivation often drops. This effect works through how we explain our actions. Our mind asks, why am I doing this? If the answer becomes for the reward, interest fades. Rewards also change attention. Instead of enjoying the task, people watch the prize. Control replaces choice, and freedom feels smaller. A famous early study happened in 1971 in Rochester, New York. Psychologist Edward Deci studied college students solving a Soma cube puzzle. Some students were paid, others were not. Later, when payment stopped, paid students played less. Deci showed that money reduced natural interest. From this study, psychologists learned that rewards can backfire. Motivation is not only about more incentives. Meaning matters. In daily life, this effect appears often. Children paid for reading may stop reading for fun. Employees rewarded only with bonuses may lose pride in work. Hobbies can feel like chores when tied to constant praise. Even adults feel it. Social media likes can change why we share. Grades can change why students learn. The task stays the same, but the feeling changes. Today, the effect is seen in schools and offices. Gamified apps offer points and badges. When rewards stop, users often quit. The lesson still applies. Understanding this effect matters. It helps parents, teachers, and leaders support motivation. It warns us to use rewards with care. By noticing our reasons, we protect our joy. We can choose meaning over pressure. Imagine you are running a race and suddenly notice a crowd cheering for you. Do you feel more excited or nervous? This feeling of performing differently when others are watching is called social facilitation. It is the way our actions can change simply because people are around. Social facilitation is when people perform tasks better or worse depending on whether others are observing them. The idea was first noticed in psychology studies in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Researchers found that the presence of an audience could boost simple or well-practiced tasks, but sometimes make difficult tasks harder. The key principle is that being watched increases our alertness and energy, which can improve performance on easy tasks but challenge us on complex ones. Think of it like a car engine. When it is running alone, it moves at a steady speed. When more people are watching, it is like pressing the gas pedal. For simple routes, the car moves faster and smoother. For a tricky road, it might skid or struggle. This helps us understand how our behavior changes with attention. One famous example happened in 1898 in the United States. Norman Triplett, a psychologist, studied cyclists who raced alone versus with competitors. He observed that cyclists were faster when they raced against others than when they rode alone. This showed that the presence of others can influence performance. The insight was that people can be energized or challenged by social situations. In everyday life, social facilitation appears in school, sports, or even playing music. A student may read aloud more confidently in class than at home. Athletes often run faster during competitions than in practice. Even video gamers perform differently when friends watch their game. The reason this happens is psychological. When people are present, we feel more alert and self-aware. Our nervous system gets a small boost of energy. For simple skills, this energy improves performance. For difficult tasks, the extra attention can create pressure and mistakes. Next time you feel eyes on you, remember that this moment can be an opportunity. The presence of others can bring out your best or challenge you, but knowing how it works gives you a choice in how to respond. Imagine trying to change someone's mind about something they strongly believe. You share facts, explain clearly, and hope they will understand. But instead of listening, they seem to hold their beliefs even tighter. This surprising reaction is what psychologists call the backfire effect. At first, it can feel frustrating or even confusing because it seems the more you explain, the less people accept new ideas. The backfire effect happens when people react to information that challenges their beliefs by believing in their original ideas even more strongly. Psychologists first noticed this in studies about political opinions and misinformation. One key feature is that the effect often appears when beliefs are tied to identity or strong emotions. People do not simply reject facts. They strengthen their old opinions. The idea of the backfire effect became well known in the early 2000s through research on how people respond to corrections. For example, when someone strongly believes a rumor, providing proof against it can make them defend the rumor even harder. These studies showed that the effect is not just about being stubborn. It is about how the mind protects itself from feeling wrong or threatened. Over time, the backfire effect helped explain why misinformation spreads and why debates can become so heated. Think of the backfire effect like trying to push a parked car up a hill, but the car slides back each time you push. Your effort does not move it forward immediately. It makes the car stick even more. This shows how our minds sometimes resist change. Understanding this helps us see that people are not refusing facts out of rudeness, but because their minds are protecting themselves. The backfire effect reveals how human thinking is not always logical. It challenges the idea that facts alone can change minds. This affects how we talk to others, make decisions, and form opinions. It also raises questions about identity and beliefs. Our views are often connected to who we are and what we value. Changing them can feel like changing a part of ourselves. Knowing about the backfire effect can help in everyday life. We can approach conversations with patience and empathy. Instead of forcing someone to change, we can ask questions, listen, and share ideas gently. This awareness can improve friendships, debates, and even learning experiences. Small shifts in approach can lead to better understanding and cooperation. Next time you want to share a new idea, pause and think about how you approach it. Remember that minds resist pressure, not just facts. By being patient and curious, we can open doors to understanding. The backfire effect teaches us that true change takes care, not force. Imagine a classroom where students are taking a science quiz. Some are confidently writing answers without checking them. Others are quietly pausing, unsure if they are right. The room feels a little tense, a little curious, like everyone is measuring themselves against the challenge. This is the world where our minds meet our knowledge. Why do some people think they know more than they really do, while others who are very skilled doubt themselves? This question leads us to the Dunning-Kruger effect. Psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger first noticed that people with low ability often overestimate their skill, while experts sometimes underestimate theirs. It is a puzzle of the mind, showing that knowing little can make us feel very confident. Picture two students. One barely studied but believes they are ready to ace the quiz. The other studied for hours but worries they might get many answers wrong. The first student acts with confidence, the second with caution. The contradiction is striking. Confidence does not always match competence. This happens because those with little knowledge do not know what they do not know, while those with deep knowledge understand the limits of what they know. One explanation is that learning itself reveals gaps. When you know little, you cannot see the gaps, so you feel sure. Another view is that experts measure themselves against high standards and see what they have yet to learn, making them doubt. Both perspectives show that perception of skill is not only about facts but also about self-awareness. However, this does not mean confidence is always wrong or expertise is always humble. Sometimes beginners guess correctly and experts feel confident after careful reasoning. The Dunning-Kruger effect reminds us to be careful with our judgments about ourselves and others. It suggests the importance of reflection and learning. In life, people who think they know everything may miss opportunities to grow, while those who doubt themselves may hesitate to share valuable knowledge. The lesson is to balance humility and confidence, curiosity and caution, knowing that learning changes both our skill and our self-awareness. Knowing is more than having answers. Confidence is more than feeling right. Understanding our limits can help us grow wiser. The mind is both a mirror and a mystery, and exploring it teaches us how to see ourselves more clearly. Imagine you found a $20 bill on the street. You feel happy, right? Now imagine you lost $20 from your wallet. You probably feel worse than the joy of finding it. This difference in how we feel about gains and losses is called loss aversion. It is the idea that losing something hurts more than gaining the same thing brings pleasure. This is a small but powerful truth about how humans think and feel. Loss aversion means our minds weigh losses more heavily than gains. One way to picture it is like holding a balloon. Gaining a balloon makes you a little happy, but losing it feels like the air has been sucked out of you. People often take bigger risks to avoid losing than they would take to win something new. The key feature is that losses feel stronger than equivalent gains. The idea became popular in psychology through the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, but its roots can be traced to everyday human behavior. A historical example comes from the stock market crash of 1929 in the United States. Many people lost their life savings almost overnight. Their pain was not just about the money lost, but the fear and regret that followed. This shows how loss aversion has affected human decisions for centuries. Supporting this idea, Kahneman and Tversky's research in 1979 showed that people are more likely to take risks to avoid losing money than to gain the same amount. For example, in experiments, participants often rejected fair coin tosses where they could win or lose the same amount because losing felt worse than winning felt good. These studies show that loss aversion is not just a feeling, but a measurable pattern in human behavior. Psychologically, loss aversion happens because our brains are wired to protect what we have. We pay more attention to what could be lost than to what could be gained. Our perception of loss is sharper, and it can change the way we make choices, sometimes leading to overly cautious or emotional decisions. Think about a student who studies hard to avoid failing instead of studying to get an A. The fear of loss drives action more than the desire for reward. This shows how loss aversion shapes everyday life, from money to school to relationships. The lesson is to notice how loss affects your choices and try to balance fear and hope. Understanding this can help in making calmer, wiser decisions. Loss aversion reminds us that our minds are not always fair judges of risk. Recognizing this gives us a chance to reflect, act thoughtfully, and perhaps find courage in taking measured risks despite our natural fears. Imagine you start reading a book but never finish it. Days later, the story still lingers in your mind. Why does something unfinished stick with us more than something we have completed? What makes our minds hold on to incomplete tasks? This is where the Zeigarnik effect comes in. The Zeigarnik effect explains that unfinished tasks stay in our memory longer than tasks we have completed. Psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik noticed this phenomenon in the 1920s. She found that our brains treat unfinished work differently, keeping it active until it is resolved. The Zeigarnik effect works because our minds create a tension when a task is incomplete. This tension keeps the task at the forefront of our thoughts. Once we finish the task, the tension disappears, and the memory becomes less urgent. Think of it like a book left open on a table. The pages flutter slightly in the breeze, reminding you that the story is not finished. Your mind is like that book, constantly nudged by unfinished pages. In her famous experiment in 1927, Zeigarnik asked waiters to remember orders they served. She discovered that they recalled unfinished orders far better than completed ones. This showed that our memory naturally focuses on what is incomplete, pushing us to finish what we started. We see this effect in daily life all the time. Maybe you leave your homework half done, and it keeps coming to mind. Perhaps you start a puzzle or a video game mission and cannot stop thinking about it. Even leaving the dishes unwashed or emails unanswered can tug at your thoughts. These unfinished tasks stay in our memory and create a subtle mental pull. The reason behind this lies in cognitive tension. When we do not complete a task, our brain signals it as something important, which maintains attention on it. Our memory prioritizes what is unresolved to help us finish it efficiently. Today, the Zeigarnik effect is used in marketing and design. Television shows use cliffhangers to keep viewers thinking about the story. Apps send reminders for incomplete goals or abandoned shopping carts, keeping users engaged. Understanding this effect matters because it shows how our minds manage attention and memory. We can use this knowledge to plan better, avoid stress, or even improve learning. It reminds us that unfinished tasks carry more weight than we realize. Next time you leave something incomplete, notice how it lingers in your mind. The unfinished tasks are not just interruptions. They are signals from your brain urging completion. Our minds are wired to nudge us forward, one unfinished step at a time. Have you ever noticed the beauty in a cracked teacup, an old wooden door, or a faded photograph? Wabi Sabi is all about finding beauty in imperfection, impermanence, and simplicity. It teaches us to see value in things that are worn, aged, or incomplete. Imagine walking through a quiet garden where leaves are falling and moss covers the stones. That calm, gentle feeling captures Wabi Sabi. It invites us to pause, notice, and appreciate life as it really is, not as we wish it to be. Wabi Sabi is a Japanese way of seeing the world. It celebrates imperfection, natural aging, and quiet simplicity. Think of it like a rough pebble on a beach that has been shaped over time. Its cracks and smooth edges tell a story. The main idea is to value things for what they are, rather than what they could be. Wabi Sabi began in Japan during the 15th century. It became part of the tea ceremony, guided by the tea master Sen-no Rikyu. He believed that the beauty of a simple, imperfect tea bowl was greater than one that was flawless and expensive. People noticed that a chipped bowl or a cracked cup could create a deeper sense of connection and peace. This idea slowly spread into art, design, and everyday life in Japan. Psychologically, Wabi Sabi makes us pay attention to details we often overlook. Our minds find calm in simplicity and imperfection because it reminds us that life is natural and temporary. It can reduce stress by helping us accept change and letting go of the need for perfection. Imagine a handmade mug you use every morning. One day it cracks, and instead of throwing it away, you continue to use it. The crack makes the mug special. You remember the mornings you spent with it and feel a quiet joy. The imperfection connects you to time, memory, and the simple act of drinking tea. Wabi Sabi teaches us to slow down and notice the small details in life. It changes how we see aging, objects, and even ourselves. Beauty is not always loud or perfect. Sometimes it is subtle, humble, and fleeting. You can bring Wabi Sabi into your home by valuing old furniture or simple decorations. In work, it can mean embracing mistakes as part of learning. On a personal level, it can help you accept your own imperfections. The deeper lesson is that life is temporary and unpredictable. Wabi Sabi encourages acceptance and gratitude for what we have, not what we lack. Take a moment to look around your room. Notice what is worn, old, or simple. See the beauty in its story. Reflect on how it makes you feel. Wabi Sabi shows us that imperfection can be beautiful. It teaches patience, presence, and appreciation. By noticing small, fleeting moments, we can find peace and meaning in everyday life. Have you ever noticed how some people seem calm, happy, and full of purpose in their lives? It is as if they wake up every day knowing exactly why they are here. Many of us rush through our routines without really thinking about what brings us joy or meaning. This observation makes us wonder if there is a way to live with more purpose and satisfaction. One idea that helps explain this is called Ikigai, a Japanese concept that blends happiness, purpose, and daily life in a simple yet profound way. Ikigai means the reason for being. It is the feeling of having a purpose that gives life meaning. The idea is that everyone has something that they love, something they are good at, something the world needs, and something they can be rewarded for. When these elements come together, life feels full. This contrasts with the common belief that success is only about money or fame. Ikigai teaches that true fulfillment comes from balance and personal meaning, not just achievement. The idea of Ikigai has roots at Okinawa, Japan, in the early 20th century. In the 1940s, people in Okinawa lived long and healthy lives despite having little wealth. Researchers later noticed that many of these people had daily routines, hobbies, and work that they truly enjoyed. One example is Masao Okawa, who lived over 100 years and often said her happiness came from small daily joys and helping others. Over time, Ikigai became a cultural idea that linked long life, happiness, and purpose in everyday life. Ikigai appears in small ways in our daily routines. A teacher who loves teaching and sees the success of students finds joy every day. A gardener who cares for plants experiences calm and satisfaction from nurturing life. Even a parent cooking a favorite meal or helping a friend may feel ikigai in those moments. These recurring patterns show how purpose is woven into simple, ordinary actions. Understanding ikigai can change how we see our work and relationships. It encourages us to focus on what we enjoy, what we are good at, and what helps others. Compared to chasing only money or recognition, ikigai promotes deeper satisfaction and balance. It teaches that life is richer when purpose guides our choices. In Japan, ikigai is expressed through arts, crafts, and community involvement. Tea ceremonies, calligraphy, and local festivals show how people celebrate work they love. This cultural practice extends beyond personal happiness and strengthens society by connecting individuals to shared meaning. Ikigai invites reflection on what makes life meaningful. It reminds us that purpose is not a destination, but a journey in daily actions. Accepting small joys, focusing on contributions, and living with awareness creates deeper contentment. It shifts perspective from constant striving to mindful living. Ikigai teaches that life is richest when guided by purpose and meaning. Paying attention to what we love, what we do well, and how we help others can bring quiet joy every day. This idea remains relevant today, offering a simple path to balance, happiness, and a life well lived. Imagine a quiet morning, the sun rising over a calm sea. The waves move steadily, neither rushing nor stopping. You take a deep breath and feel the cool air against your skin. In this moment, there is peace, yet life around you is ever-changing. People face challenges, emotions rise and fall, yet some find a way to stay steady, like the sea itself. This steadiness comes from an ancient idea called Stoicism. Stoicism is a way of thinking that teaches people to focus on what they can control and accept what they cannot. It is about finding calm in the midst of life's storms. Stoicism began around 300 BC in Athens, Greece. A man named Zeno of Citium walked through a busy marketplace when he lost all his possessions in a shipwreck. Instead of despairing, he studied philosophy and began teaching how to live with reason and virtue. He believed that inner peace does not depend on wealth or comfort, but on the mind and how it responds to life. Stoicism emphasizes understanding life clearly, like looking at a river, and seeing the flow without trying to stop it. Beyond calming the mind, it encourages deep reflection on human nature, choices, and fairness. It is like learning to ride a horse. The horse is strong and wild, but a wise rider learns to guide it without forcing it. Imagine waiting for an important exam result. Anxiety builds as you think of every possible outcome. A Stoic would notice the worry, but remember that the result is beyond control. They focus on studying and effort, accepting the rest. In nature, a tree bends with the wind without breaking. Stoicism teaches the same flexibility for the mind, showing that strength comes not from resistance, but from calm adaptation. In everyday life, Stoicism appears in small decisions. A driver stuck in traffic might choose patience instead of anger. A student receiving criticism might listen calmly instead of reacting with hurt. Over time, these small moments create a pattern of steady thought and careful action. People practicing Stoicism often notice patterns in life, understanding that difficulties repeat, yet reactions can change. Stoicism appears in literature, theater, and poetry. Writers show characters facing hardships with calm reason, teaching the audience through action rather than explanation. Ancient Roman writers, like Seneca, wrote letters about facing death, loss, and disappointment with dignity. Artists use quiet scenes, like empty streets or lone travelers, to show the stillness that Stoicism inspires. Stoicism changes how we see the world. Events are not simply good or bad. Our judgments shape our experience. It connects to larger ideas like justice, responsibility, and the natural flow of life. Observing life through Stoic eyes is like watching the weather. You cannot stop rain, but you can choose how to respond. Humans notice emotions and events but often feel trapped by them. Stoicism teaches that thoughts can guide feelings instead of being controlled by them. The mind is like a telescope. It can focus on what matters while leaving distant distractions aside. This shows the complexity of human consciousness and the power of self-awareness. Stoicism is like sailing a boat. You cannot control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. It is like holding a flame in the wind. You protect what you can and accept what you cannot. These comparisons help reveal the balance between effort and acceptance. In today's busy world, Stoicism teaches patience, focus, and calm. People can handle stress at work, school, or relationships better. It encourages thoughtful action, not impulsive reaction. Stoicism reminds us that life has challenges, but our response shapes our experience. Appreciating small victories and inner peace can make modern life more meaningful. Stoicism is not about ignoring feelings, but understanding them. It helps people live with calm, clarity, and purpose. By learning what we can control and letting go of what we cannot, life becomes steadier, like the sea at dawn. In this practice, we find a quiet strength that guides us through storms and brings a deep sense of peace. Minimalism is a way of living that focuses on having less, but valuing it more. Imagine walking into a room that is empty except for a simple chair and a small table. It feels calm, clear, and open. Many of us live surrounded by things we do not really need. Clothes pile up in closets, gadgets crowd our desks, and messages flood our minds. Minimalism asks us to pause and notice what truly matters. It invites us to make space for clarity, peace, and focus. At its core, minimalism is about simplicity. It is like clearing a foggy window to see the world more clearly. Minimalism is not about owning nothing, but about choosing carefully what we keep. Its key idea is that having less can make life richer. It teaches us to value quality over quantity, purpose over clutter, and presence over distraction. The idea of minimalism is not new. Long ago, philosophers and monks practiced simple living to focus on wisdom and inner calm. In Japan, traditional homes were small, with only essential furniture to encourage mindfulness. Even in the modern world, people have started noticing that owning too much can make them feel anxious or tired. Early observations showed that when people removed unnecessary items from their homes, they felt lighter and more in control. Psychologically, minimalism works because humans are easily overwhelmed by choices and clutter. Too many objects or tasks can make the mind feel crowded, reducing attention and creativity. Minimalism creates a mental space where it is easier to think, imagine, and enjoy the present. It also builds a sense of purpose, as each object or activity kept has meaning and intention behind it. Consider a student named Mia. Her room was full of books, clothes, and toys she no longer used. One day, she decided to remove everything she did not truly need. She kept only her favorite items and a few study materials. At first, it felt strange, almost empty. But soon Mia noticed she could find her things easily, felt calmer, and even focused better on her schoolwork. She realized that less can make space for more thinking, more joy, and more peace. Minimalism affects how we see the world. When we remove distractions, we notice details we would have ignored. A simple cup, a clean desk, or a quiet morning can feel more meaningful. It also changes behavior. People who practice minimalism often make careful choices about what to buy, what to keep, and how to spend their time. Philosophically, minimalism asks a question: do we own our things, or do they own us? In daily life, minimalism can help in many ways. At home, it makes spaces easier to manage. At school or work, it reduces distractions and improves focus. On a larger scale, it can encourage sustainable living by reducing waste and unnecessary consumption. Strategies include decluttering slowly, choosing quality items, and reflecting on what is truly important. The deeper insight of minimalism is that happiness is not in having more, but in appreciating what we already have. It shapes awareness, teaching us to focus on experience, connection, and presence rather than objects or noise. Take a moment to observe your surroundings. Notice what fills your space and mind. Ask yourself what you really need and what can be left behind. Minimalism begins with awareness and a conscious choice to live with intention. Minimalism teaches us that simplicity can be beautiful. Choosing less can lead to more clarity, calm, and meaning. By letting go of the unnecessary, we discover the essence of life itself. The Ouroboros is an ancient symbol that shows a snake or dragon eating its own tail. At first, it might seem strange or even scary. But when we look closer, it becomes fascinating. This image represents ideas of cycles, renewal, and endlessness. It invites us to think about time, life, and change in a new way. By exploring the Ouroboros, we can see how a simple symbol can carry deep meaning across cultures and centuries. The Ouroboros has been part of human culture for thousands of years. One of the earliest known examples comes from ancient Egypt, around 1600 BCE. It appeared in funerary texts, including the Book of the Dead, where it symbolized the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Later, in the Hellenistic period, around the 2nd century CE, the symbol appeared in Greek and Roman alchemical texts linked to Hermes Trismegistus. These writings describe the Ouroboros as a snake or dragon forming a circle by eating its own tail, representing wholeness, infinity, and the unity of beginnings and endings. What makes the Ouroboros unusual is that it combines a simple image, like a snake, with a deep idea about the universe and life cycles. The Ouroboros usually looks like a circular snake, sometimes with scales, and sometimes with a dragon-like head. The circle is complete because the snake eats its own tail. This makes it seem like the shape never ends. Some images show the snake with colors that represent fire or the sky, while others are simple black and white. The important part is not the color or style, but the idea of a continuous cycle. This pattern appears in art, literature, and even science, showing the concept of renewal and eternity. The Ouroboros brings up big questions about life, death, and time. It makes us wonder if everything we see as an ending is also a beginning. People are fascinated by it because it connects to ideas of balance, wholeness, and continuity. The symbol encourages us to think about cycles in nature, like the seasons, the life of a tree, or the water cycle. Beyond just a snake in a circle, it reflects human curiosity and our search for meaning in the patterns around us. The Ouroboros is simple in design, but complex in meaning. Its circular form is easy to draw but hard to fully understand. This structure shows repetition, infinity, and self-sustaining energy. Philosophers and artists have tried to interpret this symbol for centuries. Some see it as a warning, others as a promise of renewal. Its pattern suggests that life is organized in cycles, yet each cycle can have new surprises. Looking at the Ouroboros can feel personal and reflective. Some people see hope in the endless cycle, while others feel a sense of mystery or even discomfort. The symbol allows for many interpretations, and each person might take something different from it. This flexibility is part of what makes the Ouroboros powerful. It is not just a picture, but a mirror for our own thoughts and feelings. The Ouroboros challenges normal ways of thinking. Usually, we see beginnings and endings as separate, but the Ouroboros shows they are connected. This can feel confusing because it questions simple ideas about time and life. The symbol also balances structure and freedom. The circle is clear and organized, but its meaning is open and infinite. Philosophers use it to explore ideas about the universe, consciousness, and creativity. Engaging with the Ouroboros is like exploring a puzzle without a final answer. At first, it may seem like just a snake, but slowly we start to see cycles, patterns, and deeper meanings. Thinking about the Ouroboros encourages reflection and curiosity. We notice connections between endings and beginnings, and between life and nature. The experience is not about solving a riddle, but about discovering new ways to see the world and ourselves. The Ouroboros teaches us about cycles, continuity, and renewal. It reminds us that endings can be beginnings and that mystery is value. By reflecting on it, we can learn to see life as a series of connected moments. The symbol shows how curiosity and reflection can open new ways of thinking. In the Ouroboros, a simple image of a snake becomes a mirror for endless possibilities. Imagine standing in a dark room and seeing a tiny point of light that shows the entire world all at once. Every street, every river, every face, and every moment exists in that single point. This is the idea behind the Aleph. It is not just a place or a thing, but a way to see everything at once, to understand the vastness of life in one glance. The Aleph asks a question that both excites and frightens us. What would it mean to truly see everything at the same time? Could the human mind hold such knowledge without breaking? The Aleph comes from the imagination of Jorge Luis Borges, a writer who loved exploring infinity, memory, and the mysteries of the universe. He wrote about it in a story first published in the mid-20th century. At that time, people were fascinated by science, space, and the power of thought. Borges lived in Argentina, a country full of stories, streets, and people that often appeared in his work. The Aleph became relevant because it explored both human curiosity and human limitation. It is a symbol born out of the desire to know everything and the impossibility of that knowledge. The Aleph is a point in space that contains all other points. Everything in the universe can be seen from that single spot. Its importance lies in its ability to show both the vastness and the detail of reality at the same time. Yet it also challenges us. Seeing everything may seem wonderful, but it can be overwhelming. The Aleph exists between wonder and fear, showing both beauty and chaos. You can imagine the Aleph like a small glass marble. Look into it, and instead of your reflection, you see the oceans, mountains, cities, and forests. Every living being and every object is there, moving and changing. The marble is tiny, yet it contains the universe. This metaphor shows us how something small can hold endless possibilities, and how perspective can change everything. The Aleph has several important traits. First, it is complete, containing all places and times at once. Second, it is visible only to the person who encounters it, reminding us that some experiences are personal. Third, it shows reality exactly as it is, with both joy and suffering. Finally, it is overwhelming, as no one mind can fully grasp it for long. These traits show the Aleph as a mirror of life. It is vast, intimate, and often too much to hold. The Aleph can be compared to a library that contains every book ever written. Imagine walking through the library and seeing not just books, but the lives of everyone who wrote them, the cities they lived in, and the thoughts they had. The library is both powerful and fragile. You feel awe but also the weight of so much knowledge. Similarly, the Aleph shows that understanding everything is both a gift and a challenge. Seeing the Aleph changes a person. Psychologically, it can bring awe, joy, and fear. Socially, it may isolate someone because no one else can truly understand what they saw. Practically, the Aleph reminds us that life is vast and connected, and yet no one can master it completely. Over time, the memory of the Aleph might fade, but the feeling of wonder and the sense of infinity remain. Both positive and negative outcomes teach us about the limits of human perception. For those who encounter the Aleph, the lesson is to value both what we can see and what we cannot. It reminds us that the universe is larger than our minds, and that curiosity should be balanced with humility. We learn to appreciate small details while respecting the vast whole. Recognition and awareness of the infinite may help us live more fully, even if we cannot hold everything at once. The overwhelming nature of the Aleph can be turned into strength. Instead of fearing the vastness, we can see it as a chance to grow. Life presents moments that feel too big or too complex. The Aleph teaches us to pause, observe, and find patterns in chaos. By seeing life as connected, we can gain resilience and empowerment. Challenges become opportunities to understand and act with wisdom. For society, the Aleph encourages empathy and awareness. We cannot know everything another person experiences, but we can acknowledge the richness of their lives. Recognizing the vastness of the world fosters kindness, curiosity, and cooperation. Observers can learn to respect others' perspectives while reflecting on the limits of human understanding. It calls for humility and shared responsibility in a complex world. The Aleph reminds us that the universe is immense, interconnected, and full of detail. Its lesson is both simple and profound. We may never see everything at once, but we can live with wonder and awareness. In the end, the Aleph is not just a point in space, but a way to see the beauty and mystery in every moment of life. Imagine a library so vast that it seems to stretch forever. Shelves rise higher than the eye can see, filled with books in every language, in every order, containing every combination of letters. This is not just any library. It is the Library of Babel, a place of endless possibilities and strange mysteries. It is unique because it contains all knowledge and, at the same time, almost nothing that makes sense. Every book that could ever exist, every truth, every lie, every story, is somewhere on its shelves. Yet finding something meaningful is nearly impossible. The Library of Babel makes us question what it means to search, to know, and to understand. The Library of Babel comes from a story by the Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges. Borges imagined it as a thought experiment, a way to explore infinity and knowledge. He described a universe made entirely of hexagonal rooms, each lined with books. The idea was never meant to be built in real life, but it has fascinated readers for decades. Borges wrote in the 20th century, a time when ideas about information, communication, and the universe were changing quickly. The library is unusual because it is both a library and a universe. It is limitless yet structured. It suggests that knowledge can be infinite, but understanding it may be beyond human reach. The library is made of countless hexagonal rooms. Each room has shelves filled with books that are exactly the same size. Each book contains 410 pages, and each page has 40 lines of 80 characters. The letters appear random, yet they are in every possible combination. Some books make sense, while most are nonsense. Some contain the past, others the future, and some contain secrets we have not yet imagined. What makes the library extraordinary is that it is complete in every way, and yet impossible to navigate fully. Every book exists somewhere, but the meaning is hidden among billions of meaningless volumes. The library makes us think about knowledge, truth, and human desire to understand everything. It raises questions like what it means to know something, how we find truth, and whether knowing everything is even possible. Humans are naturally curious, and the library reflects that curiosity in its extreme form. It also touches on the idea of infinity and the limits of human perception. The library is not just a physical space, it is a mirror of our search for meaning. It challenges us to think about the difference between having access to information and truly understanding it. The library is carefully organized in a pattern that repeats endlessly. Its rooms are hexagonal, connected by narrow corridors, and each room has an identical arrangement of shelves and books. Despite this apparent order, the content of the books is chaotic. Some people imagine trying to map the library, but the task is impossible because it is infinite. Others try to find patterns in the letters, hoping to discover hidden codes or messages. The structure shows a tension between form and randomness. The library is orderly on the outside but unpredictable on the inside, like a puzzle that cannot be solved completely. Being in the library would be overwhelming. You could spend a lifetime searching for a book that matters and still not find it. Some people imagine feeling excitement, hope, or curiosity. Others might feel despair or frustration because meaning is so rare. Each visitor would have a different experience. Some might focus on the beauty of endless words, while others might become lost in the chaos. The library encourages reflection. It makes us wonder what matters in life. Is it the knowledge we find, the journey we take, or the attempt to understand? The Library of Babel challenges normal ideas about libraries, knowledge, and order. Normally, libraries are places where information is organized and accessible. Here, information is everywhere and nowhere. The library shows how structure can hide confusion and how chaos can exist inside order. It also raises philosophical questions. If every book exists, does anything matter? If truth is surrounded by endless nonsense, how do we know what is real? The library asks us to think differently about learning, discovery, and certainty. Engaging with the library is like a mental adventure. It is not about reaching a final answer, but exploring the infinite possibilities. Each search is an opportunity to reflect, to imagine, and to question. One might try to find meaning in a single book, or they might wander through endless nonsense and enjoy the act of searching itself. The library becomes a journey of thought, a test of patience, and a meditation on human curiosity. It teaches that some mysteries cannot be solved, but exploring them is valuable. The journey matters more than any conclusion we can reach. The Library of Babel is more than a story. It is a reflection on infinity, knowledge, and the human mind. It reminds us that searching and wondering are important, even when answers are hidden. The library encourages curiosity, imagination, and reflection. It teaches us that mystery is value, and that exploration is often more meaningful than certainty. In the end, the Library of Babel is a space where the mind can roam freely, asking questions that may never be answered, and discovering the wonder of the infinite.